Magandang umaga, grade 11. Narito naman po muli ang iyong kaibigang guro sa asignaturang Mathematics ngayong ika-22 ng Marso 2021. In today's lessons, we are going to discuss about how to solve for the mean, variance, and standard deviation of discrete probability distributions. And after these lessons, you are going to answer your learning activity sheets that was given to you. So stay tuned, my dear students. Let us start with the definition of terms. We have mean, variance, and standard deviation. What is the mean? The mean is the average of all possible outcomes. It is otherwise referred to as the expected value of a probability distribution. When we say expected value, it means that if we repeat any given experiment infinite times, the theoretical mean would be the expected value. For instance, the mean of rolling a die is theoretically 3.5. You will never roll a 3.5 no matter how many times you roll the die because there's only 3 and 4. However, if you take the average of all outcomes, you should get 3.5 or at least close to that value. Ganito po yung pag-solve. So, for example, you have 3 and 4 outcomes. 3 plus 4 divided by 2, and the average is 7 over 2 or 3.5. We have the symbol for mean. It is the Greek letter read as mu. So, ito yung ginagamit natin. Instead of writing the word mean, gumagamit tayo ng symbol. So, this is the Greek letter read as mu. Now, what is the variance and standard deviation? So, these are the measures of spread or variability. So, meron tayong example ng graph dito. The first graph, it has a low variation. So, mababa yung value ng variance niya and small standard deviation. So, maliit lang yung value ng standard deviation. So, the graph is narrow or narrower compared to the second graph. So, the graph is yung spread niya, makikita nyo dito yung standard deviation, maliit lang yung spread niya. So, compared to the second graph, it has a high variation or high value of the variance and large standard deviation. So, mas malaki yung value ng standard deviation niya. So, mas wider. So, mas wider yung graph ng high variation and large standard deviation compared to the first one, which has a low variation and small standard deviation. So, ito yung pagkakaiba ng high at saka low value ng standard deviation and the variance. So, if the variance and standard deviation are low, that means that the individual outcomes of the experiments are closely spaced with each other. So, closer. Yung mga outcomes niya, magkakadikit lang. In other words, the values are almost the same values, or if they do differ, the difference is small. So, mas kukunti lang yung difference ng mga values niya. And then, if the values, dito sa second graph natin, if the values of the variance and standard deviation are high, that means that the individual outcomes of the experiments are far relative to each other. In other words, the values differ greatly. Kaya mas malawak yung standard deviation natin. So, wider yung standard deviation pag high yung values niya. Now, as a point of reference, if the values of all the outcomes in an experiment are all the same, the variance and standard deviation are both 0. But of course, this rarely happens in real-life application. So, pagka magkapareho lang yung values niya ng lahat ng outcomes natin in an experiment, so yung variance and the standard deviation are both 0. So, we have here another example of graph. The first graph you see on the top has values that are more scattered than the second graph. The data in the second graph is more closely or tightly packed together compared to the first one. So, yung data sa first one, magkakalayo-layo yung mga values niya. And the second graph, yung mga values niya halos magkakadikit-dikit. So, the variance and the standard deviation of the first graph, dito makikita natin sa first graph, mas malaki yung values ng standard deviation and the variance compared to the second graph. So, ito yung high values of the standard deviation and the variance in the first graph. And the second graph has a low standard deviation and variance. So, ganun po yung pagkakaiba niya ng high at saka low. Again, the variance and standard deviation of the first graph should have values greater than the variance and standard deviation of the second graph underneath. Okay, so meron tayong example dito. In a 5-item test, the probabilities that a student gets 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 mistakes are 3 over 20, 5 over 20, 7 over 20, 3 over 20, 1 over 20, and 1 over 20 respectively. So, ito yung given values sa problem natin. So, we have the random variables and its probability. The question is, what is the average number of mistakes that a student makes in this class? So, ano yung average? Pag sinabi mong average, yun ang mean. Mean of kung ano yung average number of mistakes na nakuha ng mga students in a 5-item test. The next is, what is the variance and standard deviation of this discrete probability distribution? So, bago tayo mag-solve ng problem, kailangan alamin muna natin kung ano yung kailangan nating hanapin or isosolve for a certain problem. So, number 1 here is, kukunin natin yung average number of mistakes. So, that is the mean. Kailangan natin isolve yung mean. The second is, what is the variance and the standard deviation of this discrete probability distribution? So, kailangan natin din isolve or hanapin yung variance and the standard deviation. Okay, to solve for this problem, anong gagawin natin? All we have to do is to arrange the given entries, which are the random variable values and their corresponding probabilities, and the first two columns. So, the first column is the random variables. Ito yung given sa problem natin. We have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So, isusulat yan natin dito sa first column, yung 0 hanggang 5. And then, the second column is the probability, or in symbols, that is the P of X, the probability of the random variable. So, for 0, the probability is 3 over 20. For 1, probability is 5 over 20. If the value of the random variable is 2, the probability is 7 over 20. For 3, we have 3 over 20. And 4, that is 1 over 20. And 5, we have 1 over 20. So in this particular example, our random variable, which we are going to call X, or the capital letter X, is the number of mistakes. Ito yung number of mistakes a student gets in a 5-item quiz. So, kaya ito yun. So, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So, you may use your calculator in solving for the unknown values. Yung mga entries natin in column 1 and 2, kinopya lang natin yan from the problem. So, given yan siya sa problem. So, no worries, i-arrange lang natin. And then, in the third column, yung interest sa third column natin is kailangan natin isolve. Paano? By multiplying the first column and the second column entries. So, for example, yung first column natin, the first entry in the first column is 0, And the first entry in the second column is 3 over 20. So, imo-multiply lang natin yan silang dalawa. And then that we get 0. So, second entries of the first column, we have 1. And the second entries in column 2, we have 5 over 20. That is 5 over 20 times 1. That is equivalent to 5 over 20. So, isusulat natin yan sa third column. And then, let's proceed to the next entry. The third entry in the first column is 2. And multiplied by the third entry in second column, which is 7 over 20. So, we get 14 over 20. So, and then we have the next entry is 3 times 3 over 20. You have 9 over 20. So, 4 times 1 over 20, that is 4 over 20. And 5 times 1 over 20, that is equivalent to 5 over 20. So, take note, pag mag-multiply tayo ng fraction, the whole number, so yung whole number, i-multiply lang natin sa numerator, and then just copy the denominator. So, yun. So, the number of rows would depend entirely on the number of possible values that the random variable may take. So, yung random variable natin is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So, hanggang dyan lang po yung we only have 6 rows po. From 0 to 5 lang po tayo. So, depende yan siya kung how many or depende yan siya sa number of possible values that the random variable may take. So, yung row natin dyan in each column. Now, to solve for the mean, all we have to do is add up all the entries of the third column. So, nakuha na natin yung value sa third column. Ang gagawin lang natin is we are going to add up. Ibig sabihin, i-plus lang natin. Get the summation. From the third column, we have the values, the following values: 0, 5 over 20, 14 over 20, 9 over 20, 4 over 20, and 5 over 20. So, i-add lang natin lahat. So, since pare-pareho yung denominator ng fraction natin, yung numerator lang pwede natin i-add. So, 5 plus 14 plus 9 plus 4 plus 5. So, ganito yun siya. So, the summation is, we have 0 plus 5 plus 14 plus 9 plus 4 plus 5. That is equivalent to 37. And the denominator of our fractions is 20. So, 37 over 20, we get 1.85. So, this is now our average. So, therefore, the mean or expected value on the number of mistakes a students may have in a 5-item quiz is 1.85. So, ganito lang po yung pag-solve ng mean natin. So, the value of the mean in the example is just the sum of all entries in the third column. So, we have here the mean is equivalent to, so this symbol, the uppercase sigma, that is read as the summation. Summation of our x times p of x. The capital letter x, ito yung random variable multiplied by the p of x or its probability. So we have 0 plus 5 over 20 plus 14 over 20 plus 9 over 20 plus 4 over 20 plus 5 over 20. That is equivalent to, kopyahan na natin yung denominator since pareho lang lahat sila na 20, common fraction, and then i-add lang natin yung numerator. So, you have 37 over 20, that is equivalent to 1.85. Ganito lang po yung gagawin natin para makuha natin yung value ng mean. So, we now have the equation number 1, that is mean is equivalent to summation of the product of our x times p of x. So, the equation number 1, ito yung gagamitin natin to solve for the means. Okay, next is the variance. So, nakuha na natin yung value ng mean of the discrete probability distribution. We can now try to solve for the variance. You cannot solve for the variance without finding first the mean. Tandaan nyo yan, hindi natin makukuha yung variance pag wala pa tayong mean, value ng mean. So, kailangan first yung mean muna yung hahanapin natin or isosolve natin para makuha natin yung value ng variance. To solve for the variance, kailangan natin mag-add ng more columns in the table yung ginawa natin kanina. So, ito yan. Yung first column dyan is the number of mistakes or the X, capital letter X, that is our random variable. The second column is the probability of the random variable. And the third is the product of the random variable and its probability. And then yung i-add natin na fourth column is ima-minus lang natin yung mean bawat value ng random variable natin. So that is the difference between the entries in column number 1 and the mean, which is 1.85. Now, in the fifth column, square lang natin yan yung value from the fourth column. And then, the last column, yung entries natin sa fifth column, imo-multiply lang natin sa P of X or the probability of the random variable. So, ganun lang ang gagawin natin to solve for the variance. Let us try to solve yung third entry natin sa first column, which is the value of the random variable is positive 2. Now, nakuha na natin ang mean, which is 1.85. So, for the fourth column, anong gagawin? Subtract the computed mean from the value of the random variable. So, since the computed mean is 1.85, then 2 minus 1.85 is equal to 0.15. So, isusulat niya natin dito sa fourth column natin. Now, next step, sa fifth column natin, to find the value of the entry to this column, simply square the value that you obtained in column 4. So, yung value natin sa column 4, square lang natin yan or times to itself, magiging 0.15 times 0.15 or 0.15 raised to 2, that is equivalent to 0.0225. So, yun din ang isusulat natin sa fifth column natin. Now, the last column, which is sixth column, this is the product of yung square natin na difference between the random variable and its mean. And then multiply natin sa P of X or the probability of the random variable. The value in the fifth column, imo-multiply natin yan sa P of X, which is the value from the second column. So, multiply in the sixth column. Anong gagawin? Multiply the value you obtain in column 5 back to the probability in column 2. So, 0.0225 multiplied by 7 over 20. Yung sa second column times the fifth column, yun ang isusulat natin sa sixth na column natin. So, 0.225. So, 0.0225 times 7 over 20, that is equivalent to 0.007875. So, yun po ang gagawin natin. Ang kailangan natin ng mga entries to solve for the variance. Okay, after performing all calculations, the completed table would look something like this. So, you can try to and solve for yourself to see how these values were obtained. So, gagamitin nyo yung steps kanina, yung ginawa natin, para makumpleto po yung table natin. So, the symbol for variance is, that is the lowercase sigma raised to 2. And our variance is equivalent to the summation. So, summation ng lahat ng values na nakuha natin sa sixth column. That is the square of x minus the mean times the p of x. So, summation, ibig sabihin, i-add up lang natin lahat yon. And then, we have 1.6275. So, ito na yung variance natin. So, the value of the variance of the discrete probability distribution shown above is just the sum of all entries in the last column. So, lahat ng entries sa last column natin kanina, so balikan natin. So, ito lahat. yung sixth column natin, if you're going to add up all of these numbers, these values sa sixth column natin, ito na yung value ng variance natin. So, that is the summation of the product of the square of x minus the mean and the p of x. So, we have 1.6275. Our equation number 2 is the formula for the variance. That is equivalent to the summation of the square of x minus the mean and the p of x. So, nakikita natin dito sa sixth column natin. So, if you're going to get the summation of these entries, that is equivalent to 1.6275. So, kaya po tayo nag-add ng 3 columns para po mas madali at makita natin kung paano po nakuha yung variance natin. And for the standard deviation, that is the square root of the variance. So, square na natin yung variance. That is equivalent to the square root of the value of our variance is 1.6275. That is more or less equivalent to 1.28. Okay? So, the value of the standard deviation is solved by getting the square root of the variance. And we have our equation number 3. That is the formula for the standard deviation. That is equivalent to the square root of the variance. So, kung ano yung value ng variance, square root lang kukunin natin ng square root niya, and that is now our standard deviation. Okay, let us review what are the steps in solving for the mean, variance, and standard deviation. So, yung ginawa natin kanina. So, step 1, finding the mean tayo. Ito yung una natin na solve kanina. Multiply the random variable by its probability. So, ito yung first step. Yung sa third column, this is the product of the random variable and its probability. And then step 2, use equation number 1. Ano yung equation number 1 natin? That is the summation of the x times p of x. Yung summation ng values from the third column. So, use the equation number 1 to find the mean by adding all products obtained in step 1. So, lahat ng value sa third column, i-add lang natin yung lahat, and that is now our value for our mean. So, which is 1.85. So, equation number 1 is mean is the summation of x times p of x. Now, finding the variance. Step 3, subtract the computed mean from each value of the random variable. So, yung each random variable minus the value of the mean. So, yun ang sa fourth column natin. And then, step 4, square the value obtained in step 3. So, ito yung makikita natin sa column number 5. The square of the x minus the mean. And then step 5, multiply the value obtained in step 4 by the given probability. So, yung sa sixth column natin is the square of the x minus mean multiplied by the p of x. And then step 6, use equation 2 to find the variance by adding all products obtained in step 5. So, lahat ng value sa sixth column natin, i-add lang natin yan to get the value of our variance. So, our equation is the summation of the x minus mean raised to 2 times p of x. So, ito na yan. So, makikita nyo sa table, sa mga nanonood dyan sa FB Live natin. So, meron tayong table na complete na po yung entries natin. Now, nakikita nyo dito sa sixth column. So, the summation of the entries in the sixth column, ito na po yung value ng variance natin. That is equivalent to 1.6275. Now, in finding the standard deviation, this is the step 7, use the equation number 3 to find the standard deviation by getting the square root of the value obtained in step 6. Now, let's have the example number 2. The problem is the probabilities that 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 accidents happen in northern Mindanao Highway in a year is 0.45, 0.22, 0.15, 0.10, 0.05, 0.02, and 0.01 respectively. Find the average number of accidents that occur in the said highway each year. Now, let us solve for this problem. So, gagayahin na natin. So, we'll just follow the steps na ginawa natin kanina sa example number 1. So, yun din ang gagawin natin dito. So, napansin nyo, yung probability dito is in decimal form. So, isusulat lang natin in the table lahat ng mga given. Yung first column is our X or the random variables or the number of accidents happen in northern Mindanao Highway. So, from the problem, yung given random variable there is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So, ilang rows tayo? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rows tayo. Kasi 7 yung random variables natin. And then the P of X or the probability of X is 0.45, 0.22, 0.15, 0.10, 0.05, 0.02, and 0.01. Now, for the next column, the third column, this is just the product of the first and the second column entries. So, you have 1.8, 1.1, 0.9, 0.7, 0.4, 0.18, and 0.1. Multiply lang natin yung entries from the first column by the entries from the second column. So, for example, you have 4 times 4, 4 times 0.45, kaya nagkaroon tayo ng 1.8. So, 5 times 0.22, so we have 1.1. 6 times 0.15, we have 0.9, so on and so forth na yan. So, yung sa third column natin, if you are going to add up all of these entries, the summation of this is, that is our mean or the value of our mean or the average, that is 5.18. Now, to solve for the variance, kailangan natin kumplituhin yung 6-column table natin para makita natin kung ano yung value ng variance natin and also to solve for the standard deviation. So, for the fourth column, you have x minus the mean. So, the first value of our x here is 4 minus the mean, which is 5.18. So, we have negative 1.18. The second value sa first column natin is 5. 5 minus 5.18, that is negative 0.18. The third value from the first column is 6 minus the mean, which is 5.18. That is equivalent to 0.82, and so on and so forth. And then for the fifth column, square lang natin yung values from the fourth column. So, negative 1.18 raised to 2, that is 1.3924. So, negative 0.18 raised to 2, that is 0.0234. And then, next is 0.82 raised to 2, that is 0.6724. So, yun rin ang gagawin natin hanggang complete po yung column natin ng mga entries na kailangan. And then, for the sixth column, ang gagawin lang natin is, yung value from the fifth column, i-multiply natin sa value from the second column, which is the P of X. So, the square of X minus mean times the P of X. So, here in the first row, that is equivalent to 0.62658. Saan galing ito? So, from 1.3924, yung first entry sa fifth column, multiplied by the first entry sa second column, which is 0.45. So that is equivalent to 0.62658. And then next is 0.0234 times 0.22, that is equivalent to 0.007128. And then the next is 0.6724 multiplied by 0.15, that is equivalent to 0.10086. So, pwede po kayo gumamit ng calculator para po makomplete yung table. And then, to solve po sa lahat ng mga values na kailangan natin ilagay sa column natin. Okay, so yung last column natin, the summation of the values from the last column is the value of our variance. Pag i-add natin lahat yan, ito na po yung value ng variance natin, which is 1.9876. So what is the mean? The mean is the summation of x times px. So i-add lang natin lahat to ng values from the third column ng table natin. Then we have the 5.18. That is our mean. So what is the variance? The variance is only the summation of the sixth column. I-add rin natin lahat ng values doon sa sixth column natin. That is now our value for the variance, which is 1.9876. Now, what is the standard deviation? The standard deviation is the square root of the variance, and our variance is 1.9876. That is more or less is equal to 1.41. So based on the given data, the expected number of accidents that will happen in the Northern Mindanao Highway is 5.18 with a standard deviation of approximately 1.41. So that is now the solution for our problem number 2. And that ends our lessons for today. Maraming salamat at magandang umaga. Paalam!